Gearing a new character can be quite daunting, no doubt. I recently started on my newest Zero to Hero challenge, and with this process I like to identify what type of gear I'm going to want or need to optimally play my spec for the type of content that I'm doing. Basically, I just want to make a list of ideal items so I have a target to aim for, and then obviously this will hopefully save me time while also improving my performance. So in this video, I actually wanted to talk and walk through my process with you guys. I personally use this method on all my characters that I plan on taking seriously, and if I was to start gearing a new character today, this is how I would do that. So in this video, we're going to use my monk as an example. We are already level 70 and ready to begin pushing keys or raiding or whatever, so what do? Well, the first thing you might ask yourself is what type of gear do I need to aim for? Or what items are going to be powerful for my class or role? And are there any items that I can craft instead? Well, the first thing that I like to do is reference a few different guide writers. You can find some outstanding writers on sites like Wowhead, Icy Veins, Method, or even looking up your favorite content creators. For this example, let's take a gander at Wowhead, and the Brewmaster guide is actually written by the GigaChed monk himself, Larold. He also has a YouTube channel called Wow at Night. I'll leave the link below, go check him out. Let's take a look at what secondary stats he recommends that we should aim for. Not much has changed, honestly. Versatility and critical strike will be weighted much higher than mastery or haste. Now, I do want to mention that item level will typically trump any secondary stats, but once you start reaching that upper echelon of your item level bracket, you'll definitely want to start fine-tuning your stats. Now, luckily, Larold has already put together a great list of all the gear that is ideal from all sorts of content, including both Raid and Mythic Plus. This list is great, but sometimes it might not be ideal based on an individual level because you might not be a raider, for example, or you might have limited time to do Mythic Plus, or you don't feel like farming rares. Typically, what I like to do is put together a wish list for myself in an Excel document. So we can open up a quick little sheet here, and just like that, I've put together a loot list. How I went about this is I logged into game, and I kind of just dug through the dungeon journal and wrote down every item that I believe would be ideal for my character. Now, there is a caveat to this method though. There's this fancy little thing in game called diminishing returns, and in the most simple sense, there is a breakpoint at typically 30% where additional stats beyond that threshold will yield 10% less value. There are also some classes that like to reach a certain percentage of secondary stats before focusing on others. More often than not, haste will fall into this kind of category, where tanks might want to aim for 25% haste, but then, as soon as they hit that mark, focus on verse or mastery. I don't want to get too much into the specifics here because for most players you'll never actually find yourself in this position unless you're running countless mythic dungeons per week, you're raiding, and you're doing PvP on top of all of it. Now that we have our list put together though, I want to cross-reference it to another site that I've talked about a bunch on my channel before, and that site is called subcreation.net. This is my favorite site on the planet because it's really just a hub for data, especially for PvE content. And on this site, we can see everything from talents to gear to enchants, but we're mostly going to be focusing on what items are being ran, since the purpose of this video is to really walk you through how I gear or prepare to gear for Mythic Plus. Once again, take this information on the site with the tiniest grain of salt because I can't stress this enough. Gathering as much data from as many sources will help you much more than just fully trusting in one. The reason I say this is because earlier on, a lot of players are still farming loot, and since item level is king, you'll typically find that players are willing to run less ideal stats in order to boost their main stat, in this case, agility. Another issue is that simulations are a big driving force behind what items are quote-unquote best, but as any high-end key pusher will know, more often than not there's a point where fieldcraft will come into play. We saw this in Shadowlands with Codas to the First Technique Trinket. It was a completely garbage for low-level content and really didn't shine until you were finding yourself in the highest level of Mythic Plus. This is another reason why I recommend using as many sources as you can to help pinpoint the best gear for your character. Subcreation is taking aggregated data from the top keys for each class, so if you aren't running the highest level of keys, there may be some other builds and items that might be worth exploring. Anyways, the biggest thing I want to focus on here are the trinkets and any crafted items. Very quickly, we can see that Laureate is being used by the majority of Brewmaster Monk players, assuming that those stats are actually going to be crit and versatility. This neck is pretty much best in slot for most classes and not just Brewmaster. As you scroll over most of these items, you're going to notice a pretty common trend to focus on pieces with either high verse, high crit, both of those two stats, or one of those stats paired with like mastery. As we progress later into the season, you're probably going to see some more well-refined setups. And when it comes to crafted gear, we can only wear 2 embellished items, or in other words, crafted items with effects. There are a ton of great options for Brewmaster and other classes specifically. For the most part, your sparks can be safely spent on higher level pieces that can have ideal stats. For example, there might not be a belt that has both crit and verse on it, but instead of just settling for less, we can actually craft an ideal belt by using the crafting orders in Valdrakken. Let's quickly take a gander at trinkets. You'll notice a few standout trinkets here, including a dungeon trinket with Graniscale, a raid trinket with Decoration of Flame, and a world drop trinket. Now this might change in the near future, but with current item levels and current tuning for some classes, big survivability trinkets like these two are a must for tanks to survive in higher level keys. Depending on what type of content you do, you may be willing to only obtain really one or two of these trinkets. If you're someone who doesn't raid, or you have no interest in raiding, you're gonna have to get a little bit more creative. This is a great site because typically you'll see a plethora of different pairings, but that probably won't come until later in the season. Now, I know for damage, it might be worthwhile aiming for something like the Horn of Valor from Halls of Valor, or it might be even worth taking the damage trinket like Wheatstone from Court of Stars. After reading through Wowhead and sites like Subcreation, I now feel like we have a short list of items that I'm willing to aim for, which is a great place to start. So now at this point, it's just really aiming for pieces and farming. Some players like myself really enjoyed this process, while others, well, not so much. Down the road, once I start taking this character a little more seriously, I will be updating my list and targeting certain dungeons to start getting the optimal pieces I want to push with. I really hope this video helped in some way, shape, or form. It can definitely be overwhelming trying to figure out what to aim for or what to avoid, but if you have any questions or suggestions, leave them down below. Now, I want to give a massive shout out to Walter, who actually messaged me on Instagram about covering this type of topic, and I hope that this was somewhere in the same ballpark. And also a massive shout out to all my Patreon supporters who allow me to make content like this, because without them, well, I wouldn't be here. So I can't stress enough, thank you. I hope you guys are all staying happy, healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.